The wedding reception glowed with golden light and laughter. But Daniel Morgan sat alone at table 7, watching his 4-year-old daughter Emma twirl on the dance floor with her flower girl basket still clutched in her tiny hands. He smiled despite the hollow ache in his chest. Everyone else had come in pairs, husbands and wives, boyfriends and girlfriends, all coupled up and complete. Daniel had his daughter, and that was enough. What had to be enough. He adjusted his tie and took another sip of champagne, trying not to notice the pitying glances from his cousin's friends. The whispers had started the moment he'd arrived without a +1. Again, at 28. Daniel had gotten used to being the single dad, the one who'd been left behind when his ex-boyfriend decided fatherhood wasn't for him after all. That had been 2 years ago, and Daniel had spent every day since then building a life for Emma that felt stable and full of love. Even if it was just the two of them. "Is this seat taken?" A deep voice interrupted his thoughts.
Smooth and confident, with an undertone of warmth that made Daniel's pulse quicken before he even looked up. When he did, his breath caught.
The man standing beside the empty chair was devastatingly handsome, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in magazines, with sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes the color of aged whiskey that seemed to see straight through him. Daniel recognized him immediately from the ceremony. Alexander Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies, the groom's older brother and best man. "I know, it's empty," Daniel managed, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "Everyone else is dancing or mingling." Alexander's lips curved into a slight smile as he sat down. Close enough that Daniel caught the scent of his call-in something, expensive and understated, cedar and citrus. "Good. I needed a break from being the dutiful older brother," extended his hand. "Alexander Chen, though I suspect you already know that from the speeches." Daniel shook his hand, feeling the warmth of Alexander's palm against his own, the firm confidence of his grip. "Daniel Morgan, I'm the bride's cousin. And yes, your speech was memorable." He'd actually found it touching, the way Alexander had spoken about his younger brother, with such obvious affection and pride. But he wasn't about to admit that to a stranger. "Memorable good or memorable bad?" Alexander asked, those whiskey eyes twinkling with amusement as he signaled a waiter for drinks. "Memorable honest?" Daniel replied. "You didn't give the usual cookie-cutter best man speech. It felt real." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a flicker of genuine pleasure that softened his polished exterior. "I appreciate that. Kevin means the world to me." He paused as the waiter brought them fresh glasses of champagne. "So, Daniel Morgan, are you here alone by choice or circumstance?" The question was direct but not unkind, and Daniel found himself answering honestly. "Circumstance, mostly. I have a daughter, Rima. She's the flower girl, currently spinning herself dizzy out there. Babysitters are expensive, and honestly, she's better company than most dates I could bring." Alexander followed his gaze to where Emma was indeed twirling in circles, her white dress flaring out around her, dark curls bouncing. His expression gentled in a way that made Daniel's chest tight. "She's beautiful. How old? 4 and a handful." Daniel's voice filled with the unconscious warmth that always held when he talked about Emma. "She insisted on being flower girl, even though she's terrified of crowds. Spent the whole ceremony gripping my hand and whispering about whether the petals were environmentally friendly." Alexander laughed, a rich sound that seemed to resonate in Daniel's bones. "Smart kid, environmentally conscious at 4. He turned back to Daniel, his gaze more intent now, assessing. "And her other parent? Not in the picture." Daniel kept his voice neutral, though old hurt tried to surface. "It's been just the two of us for a couple years now." Understanding flickered across Alexander's face. Not pity, Daniel was relieved to note, but something closer to respect. "That can't be easy." "It's worth it," Daniel said simply, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "She's worth everything." They fell into conversation after that, easy and flowing in a way Daniel hadn't experienced in years. Alexander was surprisingly funny, with a dry wit that caught Daniel off guard and made him laugh until his sides hurt. They talked about everything and nothing: books, travel, the ridiculous expense of weddings. Emma's current obsession with dinosaurs and whether velociraptors would have made good pets. Alexander leaned in when he talked, giving Daniel his full attention in a way that made the crowded reception hall fade away until it felt like they were the only two people in the room. Daniel found himself noticing details he had no business noticing. The way Alexander's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the elegant movement of his hands as he gestured, the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw that Daniel inexplicably wanted to touch. It had been so long since he'd felt this kind of pull toward someone, this magnetic attraction that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Your daughter's headed this way," Alexander murmured. And Daniel turned to see Emma weaving through the tables toward them, her cheeks flushed and eyes bright. "Daddy." She climbed into his lap without ceremony, tucking herself against his chest with the easy trust of a well-loved child. "I'm tired. Can we go home soon? In a little while, sweetheart?" Daniel wrapped his arms around her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Did you have fun dancing?" "Hung, but my feet hurt." Emma peered at Alexander with open curiosity. "Who's that?" says Alexander. "He's the groom's brother." Daniel felt Alexander's gaze on them, warm and attentive. "Alexander, this is Emma." "It's nice to meet you, Emma." Alexander's voice softened in that same way it had when he'd first seen her on the dance floor. "I heard you were the best flower girl today." Emma brightened, sitting up straighter in Daniel's lap. "Really? Did you see me?" "I didn't drop any petals, even though I was really nervous." "I did see you. You were very brave." Alexander spoke to her like she was a person, not a child to be patronized, and Daniel felt something warm unfurl in his chest. "And yes, I noticed you didn't drop a single petal. That takes real skill." They were interrupted by the arrival of an older couple, Alexander's parents. Daniel realized from their resemblance to the groom. Mrs. Chen smiled warmly at Daniel and Emma, but Mr. Chen's expression was more reserved, his eyes calculating as they moved between his son and Daniel. "Alexander, we're leaving soon," Mr. Chen said, his tone carrying the weight of expectation. "Don't forget dinner tomorrow night with the Wangs. Michelle will be there." Something flickered across Alexander's face: annoyance, Daniel thought, or maybe resignation. "I haven't forgotten, Father." "Good. It's time you settled down. Started thinking about the future of the company, about family." Mr. Chen's gaze flicked to Daniel and Emma with barely concealed dismissal before returning to his son. "Michelle Wang would make an excellent wife. Her father's business connections alone." "Father." Alexander's voice was firm but respectful. "Not here. Not tonight." The tension was thick enough to cut, but Mrs. Chen smoothly intervened, drawing her husband away with promises to say goodbye to other guests. Alexander's jaw was tight as he watched them go, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "Sorry about that," he said quietly, not quite meeting Daniel's eyes. "My father has certain expectations." Daniel understood immediately, the unspoken words hanging between them. Alexander's father expected him to marry a woman, to present the right image, to prioritize business and family legacy over personal happiness. It was a story Daniel had heard too many times, had lived himself in a different way when he'd come out to his own conservative parents at 20. "It's okay," Daniel said softly. "I get it." Alexander looked at him then, really looked at him, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, a shared knowledge of what it meant to live with other people's expectations weighing on your shoulders. Emma had fallen asleep against Daniel's chest, her breathing deep and even, and Alexander's gaze softened as he took in the sight. "You're a good father," Alexander said, his voice low and sincere. "That's obvious in every look, every touch. Emma's lucky to have you." Thought the compliment shouldn't have affected Daniel so deeply, but it did. His eyes stung with sudden emotion, and he had to clear his throat before responding. "Thank you. That means a lot." The DJ announced the last dance of the evening, and couples flooded the dance floor. Alexander stood, extending his hand to Daniel with a small, almost shy smile that transformed his polished features into something more genuine and vulnerable. "Dance with me?" Daniel hesitated, glancing down at Emma's sleeping form. "I can't leave her. I'll watch her, honey." Daniel's Aunt Margaret appeared beside them, her kind eyes twinkling. "Go on, you deserve a dance." And between you and me, she dropped her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "This one's much better looking than that useless ex of yours." Heat flooded Daniel's cheeks, but Alexander just laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way Daniel was already beginning to find dangerously attractive. Carefully, Daniel transferred Emma to his aunt's arms, making sure she was settled before allowing Alexander to lead him onto the dance floor. The song was slow and romantic, something about finding home in another person's arms. Alexander's hand settled at the small of Daniel's back, warm and sure, while his other hand clasped Daniel's with a gentleness that made his breath catch. They were closer than strictly necessary, close enough that Daniel could feel the heat radiating from Alexander's body. I could see the faint flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "I wasn't planning on staying this late," Alexander murmured as they swayed together, their movements instinctive and synchronized. "But I'm glad I did." Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. "Me too." They moved together in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with something Daniel was afraid to name. Alexander's thumb traced small circles against his back, a touch that felt both innocent and impossibly intimate. Daniel was acutely aware of every point of contact between them, their clasped hands, the press of Alexander's palm against his spine, the way their chests almost touched when Alexander drew him infinitesimally closer. "Can I ask you something?" Alexander's voice was quiet, meant only for Daniel's ears. "Sure. Why do you look so sad, even when you smile?" The question caught Daniel off guard, stealing his breath. No one had ever asked him that before, had ever noticed the weight he carried beneath his smiles and laughter. He looked up at Alexander, finding those whiskey eyes fixed on him, with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously exposed and seen in a way he hadn't been in years. "I'm not sad," Daniel started. But Alexander raised an eyebrow, calling him on the lie without saying a word. Daniel sighed. "Okay, maybe I am sometimes. It's just, I love Emma more than anything, and I wouldn't change having her for the world. But being a single parent is lonely. Everyone else seems to have someone to share things with, someone to turn to at the end of a hard day. And I know I'm supposed to be complete on my own, that I don't need a partner to be whole, but sometimes you want one anyway," Alexander finished softly. "Sometimes you want someone to hold you while you fall asleep, someone who chooses you every single day." Yes, the word came out as barely more than a whisper. Exactly that. Alexander's hand tightened slightly on his back, and when Daniel looked up, he found Alexander staring at him with an expression that made his pulse. Race hunger and tenderness and something that looked almost like longing. What if Alexander started, then stopped, seeming to reconsider his words? What if what? Daniel prompted, his voice breathier than he intended. Alexander glanced around the room, at his parents talking with other guests, at the bride and groom swaying together, lost in their own world, at Emma sleeping peacefully in Margaret's arms. When he looked back at Daniel, his jaw was set with determination. What if, just for tonight, you weren't alone? What if people saw you with someone, saw that you're here with a partner? Daniel's brow furrowed in confusion. "I don't understand. Pretend I'm your husband tonight," Alexander said, the words coming out in a rush. "Or your boyfriend, your partner, whatever feels right. Let me be the person standing beside you, the one who makes it clear you're not available, not alone. Just for tonight." Why would you? "Because my father just spent 2 minutes telling me I need to settle down with an appropriate woman and produce heirs for the family legacy." Alexander's voice was tight with frustration. "Because I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. Because you look at me like I'm just a person, not a CEO or a potential business merger or a disappointment. Because," he stopped, his eyes searching Daniel's face. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since I sat down at your table." Daniel's breath caught. His rational mind screamed caution. This was a stranger, someone he'd known for barely 2 hours, someone whose life existed in a completely different stratosphere from his own. But his heart, his lonely, aching heart, wanted so desperately to say yes, to have someone stand beside him, to feel less alone, even if it was just pretend. "Okay," he heard himself say, "just for tonight." Alexander's smile was like sunrise, bright and warm and full of promise. The song ended, but he didn't immediately release Daniel, his hand lingering at his back for a moment longer before they separated. As they walked back toward the table, Alexander's hand found the small of Daniel's back again, a gesture that looked natural and possessive and sent shivers down Daniel's spine. Margaret handed Emma back to Daniel with a knowing smile. "You two look good out there," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Very good." "Thank you for watching her," Daniel murmured, settling Emma against his shoulder. She stirred but didn't wake, used to being carried when exhausted. "Any time, sweetheart." Margaret patted his cheek affectionately. "It's good to see you happy. You deserve someone who looks at you the way he does." Crept up Daniel's neck as he realized Alexander was indeed watching him with an expression that made his pulse race warm and attentive and undeniably interested. It felt dangerous and thrilling all at once. The reception was winding down, guests filtering out into the summer night. Alexander walked with Daniel to his car, his presence steady and reassuring beside him. Daniel carefully buckled Emma into her car seat, making sure her seatbelt was secure and her favorite stuffed dinosaur was within reach. When he straightened, Alexander was standing closer than expected. Backlit by the parking lot lights in a way that made him look almost unreal. "Thank you for tonight," Alexander said softly. "I meant what I said. I'm glad I stayed." "Me too." Daniel's voice came out husky, "Though I think we failed at the whole pretending thing. We barely saw anyone after that dance." Alexander's lips quirked into a smile. "Maybe we needed the pretending less than we thought." He pulled out his phone, hesitating for just a moment before asking, "Can I have your number? I know tonight was supposed to be just tonight, but I'd like to see you again. If you're interested." Daniel's heart soared, even as his practical mind tried to inject caution. They lived in different worlds, Alexander, with his technology empire and society parents. Daniel with his modest apartment and life revolving around dinosaur-themed birthday parties and preschool pickup. But the hope in Alexander's eyes, the vulnerability beneath his polished exterior, made Daniel want to take the risk. "I'm interested," Daniel said, pulling out his own phone with hands that trembled slightly. They exchanged numbers, fingers brushing as they handed phones back. And even that small touch felt electric. Alexander stepped closer, and for one heart-stopping moment Daniel thought he might kiss him. Instead, Alexander reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind Daniel's ear, his fingers lingering against Daniel's cheek in a touch that felt more intimate than any kiss could have been. "Drive safe," Alexander murmured. "Text me when you get home." Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. He climbed into his car, glancing in the rearview mirror as he pulled away to see Alexander still standing there, watching him leave with an expression that made Daniel's chest ache with possibility. Emma stirred in her car seat as they drove through the quiet streets. "Daddy," she mumbled sleepily. "I liked your friend." "Yeah." Daniel's lips curved into a smile. "Me too, baby." "Me too." His phone buzzed as he pulled into their apartment complex parking lot. A text from an unknown number that made his heart skip. "I already miss you." "Is that weird?" Alexander Daniel's fingers hovered over the keyboard before he typed back. "Only if it's weird that I miss you too." Daniel, he carried Emma inside, got her changed into pajamas, and tucked into bed without fully waking her, then collapsed onto his own bed with his phone clutched to his chest. This was dangerous, he knew. Alexander Chen wasn't just out of his league, he was playing an entirely different game. But as his phone buzzed with another text, then another. As they talked late into the night about everything and nothing, Daniel let himself hope. Just a little. The next morning arrived too early. Sunlight streaming through Daniel's bedroom window and Emma's enthusiastic bouncing on his bed serving as his alarm clock. "Daddy. Daddy, wake up. Can we have pancakes? The dinosaur-shaped ones?" Daniel groaned, squinting at his phone. 6:30. He'd been up until almost 2 texting with Alexander.
Oh.
Their conversation flowing as naturally as it had at the wedding. His body protested the lack of sleep, but his heart felt lighter than it had in months. "Pancakes sound perfect, Jelly Bean." He scooped Emma up, making her squeal with delight as he carried her to the kitchen. "But you have to help me mix the batter." They fell into their Sunday morning routine, Emma standing on her step stool at the counter, carefully cracking eggs, while Daniel measured flour and milk. She chattered about the wedding, about the dancing and the cake, and Daddy's friend Alexander, who was really tall and had nice eyes. He did have nice eyes, didn't he? Daniel murmured, flipping a triceratops-shaped pancake. Are you going to see him again? Emma asked with the directness only a 4-year-old could manage. Because you smiled a lot when you talked to him. Like a real smile, not the tired one you use after work. Daniel's heart squeezed. His daughter saw too much, understood too much. I don't know, baby. Maybe? Would that be okay with you? Emma considered this seriously, her small face scrunched in concentration. Would he be nice to you? And to me? I think so. He seemed very nice. Then it's okay. She nodded decisively. But he has to know that you're the best daddy in the whole world. And if he's not nice to you, I'll tell him to leave. Daniel swept her into a fierce hug, overwhelmed with love for this tiny, fierce person. How did I get so lucky to have you? His phone buzzed on the counter. Alexander's name lit up the screen, and Daniel's pulse quickened as he read the message. Good morning. I hope Emma didn't wake you too early. I was thinking, if you're free next Saturday, maybe I could take you both to the Natural History Museum. I heard they have a new dinosaur exhibit. Alexander Daniels stared at the message, his heart doing complicated acrobatics in his chest. Alexander wanted to see him again. Wanted to spend time with Emma. Most guys Daniel had tried dating ran the moment they learned he had a daughter. But Alexander was actively including her in his invitation. She did wake me at the crack of dawn, but I'm used to it. The museum sounds amazing. She'd love it. Are you sure you want to deal with an overexcited 4-year-old? Daniel, the response came quickly. I wouldn't have asked if I wasn't sure. Besides, I'm looking forward to hearing her dinosaur facts. Something tells me she knows more about them than I do. They texted throughout the day as Daniel tackled laundry and cleaned the apartment while Emma played. Alexander sent pictures of his morning his home gym, sleek modern kitchen where he was attempting to make coffee, his cat Luna who appeared to be judging him from the counter. Each message felt like a small gift, a window into Alexander's life that made him seem more real. Less like the polished CEO and more like a person. By the time Daniel tucked Emma into bed that night, reading her favorite book about a T-Rex who wanted to be a vegetarian, he was smiling more than he had in months. His phone buzzed with another text as he settled onto the couch. Is it too soon to tell you I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since yesterday? Alexander Daniels' fingers trembled slightly as he typed back. If it is, then we're both moving too fast. Because I can't stop thinking about you either. The call came a moment later. Daniel answered, pressing the phone to his ear as Alexander's voice washed over him. Warm and intimate in the darkness. Hi, Alexander said softly. Hi. Daniel's voice came out rougher than intended. I'm sorry for calling late. I wanted to hear your voice. Texting is good, but it's not the same. No, it's not. Daniel settled deeper into the couch cushions, his body relaxing at the sound of Alexander's voice. Though you should know, Emma already threatened to banish you if you're not nice to me. So no pressure or anything. Alexander laughed, that rich sound that made Daniel's chest warm. She's protective. I like that. What else should I know about you two? They talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it had at the wedding. Alexander told him about growing up as the responsible older brother. Always expected to take over the family business while his younger brother got to follow his own path. He talked about the pressure of being the Chen family heir, of board meetings and investor calls, and the constant weight of expectations. But he also talked about his passion for technology, for innovation, for building something that mattered. Daniel shared his own story, coming out to conservative parents who'd taken years to accept him, falling in love with his ex-boyfriend Marcus and thinking they'd have forever, the devastating discovery of his pregnancy when Marcus made it clear he wasn't interested in being a father. He talked about those first terrifying months alone with Emma, figuring out how to be a single parent while finishing his degree and starting his career in graphic design. He talked about the fear and isolation and the overwhelming love that made every sacrifice worthwhile. You're incredible, Alexander said, when Daniel finished, his voice thick with emotion. Everything you've done, everything you've overcome, you're amazing, Daniel. I'm not, Daniel started to protest. You are. Alexander cut him off gently. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, and Emma is lucky to have you. They talked until Daniel's eyes grew heavy, until his responses came slower and his words started to slur with exhaustion. Alexander's voice was soft as he said, "Get some sleep. I'll see you Saturday." "Saturday," Daniel agreed, already half dreaming. "Can't wait." The week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Daniel threw himself into work, designing websites for local businesses and freelancing on the side to make ends meet. But his mind kept drifting to Alexander, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the warmth of his hand at Daniel's back, the sound of his laugh. They texted constantly, messages flying back and forth about everything and nothing. Alexander sent pictures of Luna being ridiculous, of his office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, of the coffee he burned, trying to make it himself instead of having his assistant do it. Daniel sent pictures of Emma's increasingly elaborate dinosaur drawings, of his tiny but cozy apartment with its secondhand furniture and walls covered in his daughter's artwork, of his failed attempt at cooking dinner that ended with them ordering pizza. He felt vulnerable sharing these glimpses into his modest life, knowing Alexander came from such different circumstances. But Alexander's responses were always warm and genuine, never a hint of judgment. "Who are you always texting?" Emma asked on Thursday evening, peering over his shoulder with the curiosity of someone who had no concept of privacy. "Alexander," Daniel admitted, feeling his cheeks heat. "We're getting to know each other better," the tall man from the wedding. Emma's eyes lit up. "Are you going to marry him, Emma?" Daniel laughed despite himself. "We've only known each other a few days." "People don't get married that fast. Grandma says when you know, you know." Emma climbed into his lap, her small hands framing his face. "Do you like him, Daddy?" Daniel looked into his daughter's serious eyes and decided on honesty. "Yeah, Jellybean. I like him a lot. Is that okay?" "Only if he makes you happy." She kissed his nose. "You deserve to be happy. How'd he raise such a wise child?" Daniel hugged her close, breathing in her familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and sunshine. "You make me happy, you know that?" "I know. But it's okay to have someone else too. I don't mind sharing you if he's nice." Saturday morning arrived with Emma awake at dawn, bouncing with excitement about the museum. Daniel had changed his outfit 3 times before settling on jeans and a deep blue button-down that Emma insisted made his eyes look pretty. He felt like a teenager getting ready for prom, his stomach full of butterflies. Alexander arrived exactly on time, looking unfairly attractive in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that hugged his broad shoulders. He held a bouquet of sunflowers in one hand and a stuffed triceratops in the other. "Hi," he said, his smile warm and slightly nervous. "The flowers are for you. The dinosaur is for Emma." Daniel's heart melted as Emma squealed with delight, accepting the plush toy with reverent hands. "He's perfect." "Thank you, Alexander. I'm going to name him Alexander. I'm honored to share a name with such a distinguished triceratops," Alexander said seriously, crouching down to Emma's level. "Are you ready to see some real dinosaur bones?" "Yes. Daddy says they have a T-Rex skeleton that's like 50 feet tall. Then we'd better get going." Alexander straightened, his eyes meeting Daniel's over Emma's head. The look he gave Daniel was heated and tender all at once, making Daniel's breath catch. The drive to the museum was filled with Emma's chatter about dinosaurs, her enthusiastic explanations of the difference between carnivores and herbivores, and her theories about what colors dinosaurs might have been. Alexander listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Emma glow with importance. Daniel watched them interact, his chest tight, with something that felt dangerously like hope. He'd been so scared of letting anyone new into their lives, of Emma getting attached to someone who might leave. But seeing her hand tucked trustingly into Alexander's larger one as they walked through the museum entrance, seeing the gentle way Alexander adjusted his stride to match her smaller steps, made Daniel think, maybe, just maybe, this could be different. The museum was crowded with families, and Alexander kept a protective hand at Daniel's back as they navigated the crowds. That small touch felt significant, a public claiming that made Daniel's pulse race. They were just friends, technically, but the way Alexander touched him, the way his eyes lingered on Daniel's face, suggested something more. Emma dragged them through the exhibits with the single-minded determination of someone on a mission. She read every placard aloud, examined every fossil, and peppered both men with questions about prehistoric life. Alexander was patient and engaged, crouching beside her to get a better look at displays, taking pictures of her posing with her favorite dinosaurs. "You're good with her," Daniel murmured during a quiet moment, while Emma was pressed against the glass of the T-Rex exhibit. Completely absorbed, Alexander's hand found his, their fingers tangling together in a way that felt natural and right. "She's easy to be good with. She's smart and funny and passionate about things. Wonder where she gets that from." Daniel bumped his shoulder against Alexander's, feeling bold. Probably her terrible taste in adults to spend time with. Alexander tugged him closer, his voice dropping to that low register that made Daniel's stomach flip. "Is that what I am?" "The worst," Daniel confirmed, but his smile betrayed him, showing up with flowers and stuffed dinosaurs. "Being charming and patient with my daughter?" Looking at me like he cut himself off, suddenly aware of how much he was revealing. "Like what?" Alexander prompted, his thumb stroking over Daniel's knuckles. "Like I'm someone worth looking at," Daniel finished quietly. Alexander's other hand came up to cup Daniel's jaw, his touch gentle but deliberate. They were standing in the middle of a crowded museum, Emma just a few feet away, but in that moment it felt like they were alone. "Daniel, you're worth looking at." "Worth knowing?" "Worth everything." The moment stretched between them, charged and trembling with possibility. Daniel's gaze dropped to Alexander's lips, his heart hammering so loudly he was sure Alexander must be able to hear it. Alexander leaned in slightly, his breath ghosting over Daniel's cheek. "Daddy." "Alexander, come see. They have raptor claws." Emma's excited voice broke the spell, and they stepped apart. Both slightly breathless, Alexander's hand slipped back into Daniel's as they crossed to where Emma was bouncing with excitement, and Daniel didn't pull away. Let people see? Let them know he wasn't alone, that someone wonderful had chosen to spend the day with him and his daughter. They had lunch at the museum cafe. Emma wedged between them in the booth, stealing fries from both their plates while she talked a mile a minute about what she'd seen. Alexander ordered her a chocolate milk without being asked. Remembered that Daniel had said he preferred coffee to tea. Paid for their meal before Daniel could even reach for his wallet. "You don't have to do that," Daniel protested. "I know. I want to." Alexander's eyes were serious. "Let me take care of you just a little. You spend so much time taking care of everyone else." The words hit harder than they should have. When was the last time someone had wanted to take care of Daniel? When had anyone last noticed that he was tired, that the weight of single parenthood sometimes felt crushing, that he needed support too? "Thank you," he said softly, meaning it for more than just the lunch. Alexander's smile was warm. Anytime. They spent another hour exploring before Emma started to fade, her energy finally depleting. She fell asleep in Alexander's arms as they walked back to the car, her head on his shoulder and her new triceratops clutched to her chest. Alexander carried her with an ease that suggested he'd done this before, though he'd mentioned he had no nieces or nephews yet. "You're a natural at this," Daniel said as he buckled Emma into her car seat. "The whole dad thing." Something flickered across Alexander's face, longing maybe, or sadness. "I've always wanted kids, a family. But my father has other plans for me. Plans that involve marrying someone appropriate and producing heirs to carry on the Chen name and legacy." Daniel's heart clenched. "And those plans don't include marrying someone you actually love? Not if that someone happens to be a man." Alexander's voice was carefully neutral, but Daniel could hear the pain beneath it. "My father is old-fashioned, traditional. He believes in appearances, in doing what's expected. Coming out would mean losing everything: the company, my family's respect, the life I've built. That's not fair to you." Daniel reached out, taking Alexander's hand. "You deserve to be happy. To be yourself. So do you." Alexander turned to face him fully, his free hand coming up to cup Daniel's cheek. Daniel, I need you to know something. This today, Usits, not just some rebellion against my father's expectations. It's not me acting out or trying to prove a point. When I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. You make me want to be brave. Daniel's breath caught. Alexander, I know we just met. I know this is fast and probably crazy, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, about us, about what it might be like to have something real with you. They were standing in a parking lot, Emma asleep in the car behind them. Alexander was looking at Daniel like he hung the moon. It was too much, and not enough, all at once. Daniel wanted to kiss him so badly his lips tingled with it, wanted to pull him close and never let go. I want that too, Daniel admitted, but I'm scared. Emma's been through so much already losing Marcus, adjusting to it just being the two of us. If we do this and it doesn't work out, then we'll figure it out together, Alexander said firmly. I'm not Marcus. I'm not going to run the moment things get hard. I know what I'm asking for, what I'm signing up for. Emma comes first, always. I respect that. I want that. Daniel searched Alexander's face, looking for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. He found only sincerity and determination, and something that looked a lot like love, even though it was too soon for that word. Okay, he breathed. Let's try. Let's see where this goes. Alexander's smile was radiant. He leaned in slowly, giving Daniel time to pull away, before pressing the gentlest kiss to his forehead. It was chaste and sweet and somehow more intimate than anything Daniel had ever experienced. Can I take you to dinner tomorrow night? Alexander asked. Just the two of us? Maybe Emma could stay with your aunt? That sounds perfect. They stood there for another moment, hands clasped. Before Daniel reluctantly pulled away to check on Emma, she was still fast asleep. Her mouth slightly opened, and her new dinosaur clutched to her chest. Daniel's heart swelled with love and hope and terrifying possibility. Alexander drove them home, his hand finding Daniel's the moment they were on the road. They talked quietly about the museum, about Emma's favorite exhibits, about Alexander's week at work. It felt domestic and comfortable, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. When they reached Daniel's apartment building, Alexander insisted on carrying Emma upstairs, despite Daniel's protests. He waited in the living room while Daniel put her to bed, and when Daniel emerged, he found Alexander examining the photos on his wall's candids of Emma at various ages. Professional shots Daniel had splurged on for her birthdays. A few of Daniel with his aunt and the small circle of friends who'd supported him through everything. Your home is beautiful, Alexander said softly. It feels full of love. Small, Daniel said self-consciously. Nothing like what you're used to, Daniel. Alexander crossed to him, framing his face with both hands. I don't care about the size of your apartment or how much your furniture cost. This place is filled with warmth and happiness and love. It's more of a home than my penthouse has ever been. Daniel leaned into the touch, his eyes stinging with unexpected tears. Thank you for today, for including Emma, for being patient with her, for everything. Thank you for letting me in. Alexander's thumb traced his cheekbone, the touch achingly tender. For trusting me with your daughter, with yourself. They stood there, inches apart, the air between them crackling with tension. Daniel's gaze dropped to Alexander's lips, and he saw Alexander do the same. His heart pounded as Alexander leaned in, moving so slowly, Daniel had time to think, to breathe, to decide. The kiss was soft and careful, a question more than a demand. Alexander's lips were warm against his, gentle and seeking, and Daniel melted into it with a small sound of relief. It felt like coming home and stepping off a cliff all at once. Alexander's hands slid into his hair, holding him close but not trapping him, and Daniel's hands fisted in Alexander's sweater, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against Daniel's. I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you sitting alone at that wedding. Then why did you wait so long? Daniel's voice was husky, because I wanted to do it right. Wanted you to know this is real for me. Alexander pressed another soft kiss to his lips, then his cheek, then his temple. Tomorrow night, dinner. Let me take you somewhere nice and treat you the way you deserve. Okay, Daniel breathed, dizzy with happiness. Tomorrow, they kissed again, slower this time, deeper, until Daniel had to pull away before things got too heated with his daughter sleeping in the next room. Alexander left with visible reluctance, stealing one last kiss at the door before heading down the hallway. Daniel locked up and leaned against the door, touching his lips with trembling fingers. He felt like a teenager again, giddy and terrified, and so full of hope it hurt. This was dangerous. This was fast. This could end in heartbreak. But oh, what if it didn't? What if this was the beginning of something beautiful? His phone buzzed. I'm already counting down the hours until I see you again. Sweet dreams, Daniel? Alexander Daniel smiled, typing back, Sweet dreams, Alexander. Thank you for making today perfect. He checked on Emma one more time before bed, brushing a kiss against her forehead. She stirred, mumbling love you, Daddy, in her sleep, and Daniel's heart squeezed. Love you too, Jellybean, he whispered. So much that night, for the first time in years, Daniel fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of whiskey-colored eyes and gentle hands and the possibility of something real. Sunday. Evening arrived with Daniel, more nervous than he'd been in years. Margaret had agreed to watch Emma with suspicious enthusiasm, making pointed comments about handsome CEOs, and it's about time. Emma had given Alexander her approval via text-up, carefully typed message that read, You better be nice to my daddy, with multiple heart emojis, and Alexander had responded with equal solemnity that he promised to be on his best behavior. Daniel stood in front of his closet, pulling out and rejecting outfit after outfit. Too casual, too formal, too tight. To Warren, he was painfully aware of the difference between his wardrobe and Alexander's, the gulf between their lifestyles that seemed to yawn wider the more he thought about it. His phone rang. Just as he was spiraling into full panic mode, Alexander's name flashed on the screen. Hey, Daniel answered, trying to keep the anxiety out of his voice. Hey yourself. Alexander's warm tone immediately soothed some of his nerves. I'm calling because I realized I never told you where we're going, and I don't want you stressing about what to wear. Daniel laughed despite himself. How did you know I was stressing? Because I've been stressing about the same thing for the past hour. I want tonight to be perfect, and I'm terrified of messing it up. Alexander's vulnerability was endearing. Wear whatever makes you feel comfortable and confident. We're going somewhere nice but not formal. And Daniel, you could show up in sweatpants and I'd still think you were the most beautiful person in the room. Daniel's cheeks heated. You're smooth, you know that? Only when I mean it. Alexander paused. I'll pick you up at 7. 7 is perfect. Daniel ended up in dark jeans and a deep green shirt that his aunt had once said brought out his eyes, paired with his nicest shoes that weren't quite as worn as the rest. He fussed with his hair until Emma, watching from his bed, said, Daddy, you look really pretty. Alexander's going to think so too. Thanks, baby. He kissed the top of her head. You'll be good for Aunt Margaret? Always am. She gave him a gap-toothed grin. Have fun, Daddy. And remember, if he's not nice, you tell me and I'll handle it. Daniel laughed, swept his fierce daughter into one more hug, then headed downstairs where Alexander was waiting by his sleek black car. Alexander's eyes widened when he saw Daniel, a slow smile spreading across his face. You look incredible, Alexander said, his voice rough with appreciation. He crossed to Daniel and kissed him softly, right there in front of Daniel's building, not caring who might see. Ready? Ready. The restaurant Alexander had chosen was elegant but not ostentatious. Soft lighting and intimate tables tucked into private alcoves. The maître d' greeted Alexander by name, leading them to a corner table with a stunning view of the city lights. Alexander held Daniel's chair for him, a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and sweet. Is this too much? Alexander asked once they were seated, genuine concern in his eyes. I wanted somewhere nice, but I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. It's perfect, Daniel assured him, reaching across the table to take his hand. Though I should warn you, my usual dinner out involves chicken nuggets and chocolate milk. Alexander laughed, his thumb stroking over Daniel's knuckles. "We can do that next time. But tonight, I want to spoil you a little." They ordered wine and appetizers, falling into conversation as easily as they always did. Alexander wanted to know everything: Daniel's favorite books, his biggest dreams, what made him laugh, what kept him up at night. He listened with his whole attention, asking follow-up questions that showed he was genuinely interested in understanding Daniel's life. "What about you?" Daniel asked as their entrees arrived. "What do you dream about when you're not being the responsible CEO?" Alexander was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, I dream about having what Kevin has now. A partner who loves me for me, not for my name or my money or what I can do for their family's business. Kids who I can take to the museum and teach to be kind and curious. A home that feels warm instead of like a showroom. A life where I don't have to hide who I am." The rawness in his voice made Daniel's chest ache. "What's stopping you?" "Fear, mostly. My father's expectations. The company's board of directors, who would have a collective heart attack if I came out. The fear of losing everything I've worked for." Alexander met his eyes. "But then I met you, and suddenly those things don't seem as important as I always thought they were." "Alexander, I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But Daniel, when I'm with you, I can see a different future. One where I'm happy and authentic and loved. You make me want to be brave enough to reach for that." Daniel's hand tightened on Alexander's. "I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. Because this feels too good to be true, and I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to realize that my life is messy and complicated and not at all glamorous. That I come with a 4-year-old who has opinions about everything and will always, always come first." "Good," Alexander said firmly. "She should come first. And I don't want glamorous, Daniel. I want real. I want messy. I want you, in whatever form that takes." They finished dinner in a haze of warmth and connection, trading stories and laughter until the restaurant began to empty around them. Alexander paid the check over Daniel's protests, then drove them to a lookout point overlooking the city. "I used to come here when I was younger," Alexander said as they stood at the railing. The city spread out below them like scattered stars, when everything felt too heavy, when I couldn't breathe under the weight of expectations. I'd come here and remind myself there was a whole world out there beyond my father's plans for me." Daniel leaned into his side, and Alexander's arm came around him automatically, pulling him close. "Do you still come here?" "Not as much as I should, but I wanted to share it with you." Alexander turned to face him, his hands settling on Daniel's waist. "This place represents possibility to me, freedom. The idea that I could be anyone, choose anything. And now when I come here, I'm going to think of you." Daniel's breath caught as Alexander leaned in, kissing him with a tenderness that made his eyes sting. This kiss was different from the ones before it, more certain, full of promise. Alexander's hands were warm on his back, pulling him closer until there was no space between them. Daniel's fingers tangled in Alexander's hair, and he poured everything he couldn't say into the kiss: his hope, his fear, his growing feelings that terrified him with their intensity. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander rested his forehead against Daniel's. "Come home with me," he whispered. "Not for I mean, just to talk. I want more time with you. I'm not ready for tonight to end." Daniel should say no, should be responsible, and go home to his daughter. But Emma was with Margaret overnight, and Daniel was so tired of being responsible all the time. He wanted Alexander with an intensity that scared him. "Okay," he breathed. "Let's go." Alexander's penthouse was everything Daniel had imagined, and more floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the city. Modern furniture in grays and whites, art that probably cost more than Daniel's car. But it was also strangely sterile, like a magazine spread rather than a home. The only signs of life were a cat tree in the corner where Luna was curled up sleeping, and a bookshelf crammed with worn paperbacks that looked decidedly out of place among the sleek decor. "I know it's not much," Alexander said, echoing Daniel's words from earlier with a wry smile. "My interior designer had a vision, and I was too busy with work to argue." "It's beautiful," Daniel said honestly. "But you're right, it doesn't feel like you." "No, it doesn't." Alexander moved to the kitchen, pulling out wine glasses. What does feel like me is this. He led Daniel to a door Daniel had assumed was a closet, but when Alexander opened it, Daniel found himself looking into a small room that was clearly Alexander's sanctuary. The walls were covered in bookshelves stuffed with well-loved books. Fantasy and science fiction mixed with business texts and philosophy. There was a comfortable armchair by the window, a telescope in the corner, and photos covering every available surface Alexander with his brother. With friends, candid shots that showed a softer, more genuine side than his polished public persona. "This is the real you," Daniel said softly. "Stepping into the space? Yeah." Alexander set down the wine glasses and wrapped his arms around Daniel from behind, his chin resting on Daniel's shoulder. "This is where I come when I need to remember who I am beneath the suits and the corporate speak." Daniel turned in his arms, cupping Alexander's face. "Thank you for showing me." They ended up in the armchair, Daniel sideways across Alexander's lap, talking and kissing and talking some more until the sky started to lighten with dawn. They discussed their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Alexander told him about the pressure of being groomed to take over Chen Technologies since he was old enough to understand what that meant, about the suffocating weight of expectations and the fear of disappointing his family. Daniel shared his own struggles, the rejection from his parents when he came out, the heartbreak of Marcus's abandonment, the overwhelming terror of becoming a single parent at 24. "You're incredible, you know that?" Alexander murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on Daniel's back. "Everything you've overcome, everything you've built for Emma, you're the strongest person I know. I don't feel strong most of the time. I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's what strength is," Alexander said gently. "Holding it together even when you're falling apart inside. Showing up every day for your daughter, even when you're exhausted. Building a good life from nothing but determination and love." Daniel kissed him, soft and slow, trying to convey everything he felt. Alexander's hands slid into his hair, holding him close, and the kiss deepened until Daniel was dizzy with it. He could feel Alexander's heartbeat against his chest, rapid and strong, matching his own. Daniel Alexander breathed against his lips. "I'm falling for you. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. But I'm falling so hard, me too," Daniel admitted, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "It terrifies me how much I'm feeling, how fast this is happening, but I can't stop it. I don't want to stop it." They kissed again, and this time there was an edge of desperation to it, a hungry need that made Daniel's skin feel too tight. Alexander's hands slid under his shirt, warm against his skin, and Daniel arched into the touch with a small sound that made Alexander groan. "Tell me to stop," Alexander whispered against his neck. "Tell me we're moving too fast. Don't stop," Daniel gasped. "Please don't stop." Alexander stood, lifting Daniel with him, and carried him to the bedroom. What followed was tender and intense, and everything Daniel hadn't known he needed. Alexander's hands mapping every inch of his skin, whispering how beautiful he was, how perfect, how wanted. They moved together with a connection that felt deeper than just physical. And when they finally collapsed together in the tangled sheets, Daniel felt tears on his cheeks. "Hey," Alexander said softly, brushing them away. "Are you okay? Did I hurt you?" "No," Daniel said quickly. "No. You wit was perfect. I haven't felt like this in so long. Haven't felt seen and wanted," and his voice broke. Alexander pulled him close, tucking Daniel against his chest and wrapping around him protectively. "I see you," he murmured. "Every part of you, and I'm not going anywhere." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other as the sun rose over the city, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt completely at peace. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and growing connection. Alexander was constantly traveling for work, but he made time for Daniel and Emma whenever he was in town. They fell into a rhythm museum, trips, and park visits with Emma, quiet dinners after she went to bed, long phone calls when Alexander was away. Emma adored Alexander. Alexander was endlessly patient with her questions and her energy and her very definite opinions about everything. Daniel's life, which had felt so small and contained, suddenly felt full of possibility. He caught himself smiling at random moments, humming while he worked, feeling lighter than he had in years. His friends noticed the change, teasing him about his CEO boyfriend. And even his aunt commented on how happy he seemed. But there were complications too. Alexander's father was pushing harder for him to settle down with an appropriate woman, specifically Michelle Wong, whose father's technology company would make an excellent merger opportunity. Alexander was increasingly stressed about maintaining appearances while nurturing his relationship with Daniel, and the strain was starting to show. "I'm sorry, Alexander," said one night, his voice tight with frustration as they talked on the phone. "My father's hosting a gala next month, and he expects me to bring Michelle as my date, to present us as a couple to his business associates." Daniel's stomach clenched. "I see. No, you don't." Alexander sounded anguished. "Daniel, it doesn't mean anything. Michelle knows I'm gaseous in a similar situation with her own family. This is just for appearances, just to keep our fathers happy while you figure out how to what? Come out! Walk away from your family's company. Alexander, I'm not naive. I know the position you're in. But I can't." Daniel's voice cracked. "I can't be your secret. Emma can't be your secret. We deserve someone who's proud to be with us, who doesn't have to hide us away. You think I want this?" Alexander's voice rose. "You think I enjoy lying to everyone, pretending to be someone I'm not? I'm trying to find a way to have both my family and you, but it takes time." "How much time?" Daniel asked quietly. "How long am I supposed to wait while you play the dutiful son? How do I explain to Emma why Alexander can't come to her birthday party next month because he has to maintain appearances?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "I'm sorry," Alexander finally said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. You're right. You deserve better than this. Emma deserves better. I don't know how to do this without losing everything." "Maybe that's the problem," Daniel said, tears streaming down his face. "Maybe you have to choose. And maybe I already know what you're going to choose." "Daniel, please, I need some space, Alexander. I need to think about what's best for Emma and me." He hung up before Alexander could respond, then turned off his phone and cried himself to sleep. The next week was miserable. Alexander texted and called constantly, but Daniel couldn't bring himself to respond. Emma asked about Alexander every day, and each time Daniel had to deflect, making excuses that felt increasingly hollow. He threw himself into work, taking on extra projects to distract himself from the ache in his chest. His friends tried to help, but what could they say? That he should be patient while Alexander figured things out. That he should be willing to hide his relationship, to be a secret. Daniel had done that before, in his early 20s, dating closeted men who wanted him behind closed doors, but not in public. He'd promised himself he'd never accept that again, especially not when Emma was involved. On the 6th day, Margaret showed up at his door unannounced. "Okay, enough wallowing. Emma's spending the night with me, and you're going to talk to me about what's really going on. It's over wine and takeout." Daniel spilled everything his feelings for Alexander. The complications with Alexander's family, the impossible position they were both in. Margaret listened without judgment, then fixed him with a knowing look. "Do you love him?" Daniel's breath caught. It's too soon for love." "Daniel Marcus Morgan, don't you dare lie to your aunt. Do you love him?" "Yes," Daniel whispered, the admission tearing out of him. "God help me. I love him. And that's why this hurts so much. Have you told him?" "How can I? He's not ready to choose us over his family. And I can't ask him to. That's not fair. But I also can't keep living in the shadows, Margaret. I did that before, and it nearly destroyed me." Margaret took his hand. "Sweetheart, sometimes loving someone means giving them time to find their courage. But it also means knowing your worth and not accepting less than you deserve. Only you can decide which is more important, waiting for him or protecting yourself and Emma." That night, Daniel finally turned his phone back on. There were dozens of messages from Alexander, increasingly desperate. "Please talk to me, I'm sorry. I'm such a coward. I miss you so much. Emma sent me a drawing, and I cried for in hurry. Don't know how to do this, but I know I can't lose. Will love you." I should have said it before. I love you, and I'm going to find a way to make this work. Daniel stared at the last message, his heart pounding. Alexander loved him. Despite everything, despite the complications and the impossible choices, Alexander loved him. His fingers trembled as he typed back. I love you too. But love isn't enough if you can't be with us fully. I won't be your secret, Alexander. Emma and I deserve more than that. The response came immediately. I know. You're right. I've been a coward, but I'm done hiding. Can we talk, please? I need to see you. Daniel's hand shook as he replied. Tomorrow. Emma has preschool from 9 to noon. Come by at 9:30. I'll be there. Daniel, I love you. Thank you for giving me another chance. Daniel set down his phone and stared at the ceiling. Hope and fear warring in his chest. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. He just had to trust that Alexander meant what he said, that love would be enough to overcome the obstacles in their path. Alexander arrived at exactly 9:30, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his eyes were shadowed. He was wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of his typical polished attire. He looked real and vulnerable and so beautiful that Daniel's breath caught. Hi, Alexander said quietly, his hands shoved in his pockets like he was afraid of what he might do with them. Hi. Daniel stepped back, letting him into the apartment. Coffee, please. They moved around each other awkwardly in Daniel's small kitchen. The easy familiarity they'd developed over the past weeks replaced with nervous tension. Finally, with coffee in hand, they sat on the couch, careful not to touch. I'm sorry, Alexander started, his voice rough, for everything. For putting you in an impossible position. For not being brave enough from the start. For making you and Emma feel like you weren't important enough to fight for. Daniel's throat tight. Why did you ask me to meet you? What's changed? Alexander set down his coffee and turned to face Daniel fully. Everything? Nothing. I love you, Daniel. I'm in love with you, and I don't want to hide that anymore. I don't want to pretend Michelle Wong is someone I could ever want, when the only person I want is sitting right here. But your father, my father, is going to have to accept who I am, or we're going to have a very different relationship going forward. Alexander's jaw was set with determination. I've spent my entire life trying to be the son he wanted, trying to fit into the mold he created. But I can't do it anymore. Not if it means losing you. Daniel's heart raced. What are you saying? I'm saying I told my father the truth last night, that I'm gay, that I'm in love with you, that I'm not going to his gala with Michelle Wong or anyone else, unless it's you on my arm. Alexander's voice shook slightly. He didn't take it well. He's threatening to remove me from the company, too. Cut me off from the family. But you know what? I realize that a life without you and Emma is worse than a life without Chen Technologies. Tears streamed down Daniel's face. Alexander, I can't let you throw away everything you've worked for. You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Alexander cupped Daniel's face with both hands, his thumbs brushing away tears. I'm choosing authenticity and love and a life that's actually mine. Yes, it's terrifying. Yes. I'm scared of losing my family, my company, everything I've known. But I'm more scared of losing you. What if you regret it? Daniel whispered. What if you end up resenting me for what you gave up? Never. Alexander's voice was fierce. Daniel, you and Emma have given me more in a few weeks than that company has given me in 30 years. You've shown me what it means to live authentically, to love fully, to build a family based on choice and connection rather than obligation. How could I ever regret that? Daniel launched himself at Alexander, kissing him desperately, tears and laughter mixing together. Alexander caught him, holding him close, and they clung to each other like drowning men finding solid ground. I love you, Daniel, gasped between kisses. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too. Alexander kissed him again, deep and sure. I love you and Emma, and I want to build a life with you. A real life, not hidden or secret. I want to pick Emma up from school and go to her birthday parties and have everyone know that I'm yours. They held each other for long moments, both crying and laughing, overwhelmed with emotion. Finally, Daniel pulled back enough to look at Alexander seriously. "This isn't going to be easy," he said. "Your family might not come around. You might lose the company. There will be gossip and judgment and people who don't approve. And Emishi has to come first, always. If this gets too hard, if it affects her negatively, then we'll figure it out together," Alexander interrupted gently. "Daniel, I'm not promising this will be perfect. I'm sure I'll make mistakes and sometimes disappoint you. But I promise I'll show up every single day. I promise I'll fight for us. I promise Emma will always be my priority too, because she's part of you, and I love her almost as much as I love you." Daniel kissed him again, softer this time, full of hope and promise. "Okay, let's do this. Let's try." They spent the rest of the morning talking through logistics and concerns, making plans for how to navigate the complications ahead. Alexander would need to have difficult conversations with his family, possibly retain his own legal counsel to protect his interests in the company. Daniel would need to prepare Emma for the increased attention that might come from dating someone high profile. But despite the challenges, Daniel felt more hopeful than he had in years. When it was time to pick up Emma from preschool, Alexander insisted on coming. They drove together, Alexander's hand resting on Daniel's thigh, and Daniel felt a surge of gratitude for this man who was willing to risk everything for them. Emma's face lit up when she saw them together. She ran straight to Alexander, who swept her up in a hug. "Alexander, you're back. Daddy said you were busy, but I told my teacher you'd come back because you promised you'd come to my birthday party." Alexander's eyes met Daniel's over Emma's head, warm and full of love. "I did promise that, didn't I? And I'm going to keep that promise. I'm not going anywhere, Em." "Good." Emma patted his cheek with her small hand. "Because Daddy's been really sad without you, even though he tried to hide it." "I've been sad too," Alexander admitted. "But I'm not sad anymore. Is it okay with you? If I spend lots more time with you and your daddy..." "Lots and lots?" Emma considered this seriously. "Will you read me stories at bedtime? Every night you want me to. And play dinosaurs?" "Absolutely. I love my daddy and be nice to him always." Alexander's voice was thick with emotion. "That's the easiest promise I'll ever make." "Then okay." Emma kissed his cheek. "You can stay." Daniel watched them together, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was his family, his daughter, and the man he loved. Both looking at him with such obvious affection and acceptance that he had to blink back tears. That night, after Emma was asleep, Alexander stayed. They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming about the future. Alexander was realistic about the challenges ahead. His father hadn't backed down from his ultimatum. The board of directors would likely side with Mr. Chen over his son, but Alexander had been building relationships with progressive investors and had ideas for starting his own venture if necessary. "I'm scared," Alexander admitted as they lay tangled together on Daniel's bed. "I've never done anything without my father's approval before. What if I fail? Then you fail, and we figure it out together." Daniel pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "You're not alone in this, Alexander. Not anymore." "I'm really not, am I?" Alexander's arms tightened around him. "I have you and Emma and a whole future ahead of us. That's more than I ever thought I'd have." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. And Daniel dreamed of wedding vows and adoptions papers and a future full of love. The next month was a whirlwind. Alexander's coming out made headlines, Chen. Technology's heir comes out as gay. Relationship with single father rocks corporate world. The scrutiny was intense and invasive, with paparazzi camping outside Daniel's apartment and reporters trying to dig up dirt on both of them. Daniel's modest life suddenly felt exposed and vulnerable, and he worried constantly about the impact on Emma. But Alexander was there through all of it, steady and supportive. He hired security to keep the paparazzi at bay, worked with a PR team to control the narrative, and most importantly, made sure Daniel and Emma felt protected and loved through the chaos. Alexander's father did follow through on his threats, voting to remove Alexander from his position as CEO and cutting him off financially. It was devastating to watch Alexander lose the company he'd dedicated his life to building, but he handled it with more grace than Daniel would have thought possible. "It was never really mine," Alexander said one night as they sat on Daniel's couch, Emma asleep in his lap, and Daniel tucked against his side. "It was my father's company, his vision, his legacy. Now I get to build something that's actually mine. Something I can be proud of because it reflects who I really am. Within weeks, Alexander had investors lined up for his own tech startup, focused on accessibility software, passion project he'd been forced to shelve at. Chen Technologies because it wasn't profitable enough for his father's tastes. He was excited and energized in a way Daniel had never seen, coming alive as he built something from the ground up. But the best part wasn't the professional success. It was the life they were building together. Alexander had moved into a new apartment closer to Daniel's building, still nice, but not the ostentatious penthouse. He spent nearly every evening with Daniel and Emma, becoming a fixture in their routines. He learned to braid Emma's hair, mastered the art of reading bedtime stories with different voices for each character, and attended every preschool event with pride. Emma thrived with Alexander in her life, blossoming with the security of having two adults who adored her. She started calling Alexander Papa Alexander, which made him cry the first time she said it. Daniel watched his daughter and the man he loved bond and felt grateful beyond words. Not everyone was supportive. Daniel's parents, who'd barely been in his life since he came out, reached out with barely concealed motives, suddenly interested in their grandson, now that he was dating someone wealthy. Daniel shut that down immediately, refusing to let them use Emma to get to Alexander's money. Some of Alexander's old colleagues distanced themselves, willing to associate with someone who'd been publicly disowned by his family. But they also found unexpected allies. Kevin, Alexander's brother, reached out to offer his support, defying their father's orders. Alexander's mother called weekly, carefully maintaining a relationship with her son, even as she navigated her own complicated position within the family. Emma's 5th birthday arrived, and they threw her the dinosaur party of her dreams in a local park. Alexander helped Daniel plan every detail, from the T-Rex cake to the fossil excavation activity to the costumes for all the kids. As Daniel watched Alexander on his hands and knees, helping children dig for plastic dinosaur bones, his heart felt so full he thought it might burst. "He's really good with them," Margaret commented, appearing at Daniel's elbow with a knowing smile. "You chose well, sweetheart." "I think he chose me," Daniel said softly, unable to take his eyes off Alexander, who was now wearing Emma's flower crown and roaring like a dinosaur while the kids shrieked with laughter. "You chose each other. It's how the best relationships work." Margaret squeezed his arm. "Your parents would be proud if they could see past their own prejudices. You've built a beautiful life, Daniel." That night, after all the guests had left, and Emma had crashed from a sugar high, the three of them cuddled together on the couch. Emma was wedged between them, sticky from cake and grinning with pure joy. "Best birthday ever," she declared. "Papa Alexander, you're the best dinosaur. Thank you, Em." Alexander kissed the top of her head. "We're the best birthday girl." She yawned hugely, then looked up at Alexander with serious eyes. "Are you going to marry my daddy?" Alexander's gaze met Daniel's over her head, warm and full of love. "Would you be okay with that if I did?" "Hung. Then we'd be a real family." "We're already a real family," Daniel said gently, his voice thick with emotion. "Family isn't just about marriage certificates. It's about people who love each other and choose to be together." "I know." Emma patted both their hands. "But marriage is nice too. That's what Miss Sarah at school says, that her two dads got married and had a big party with cake." Alexander laughed, the sound full of joy and possibility. "Well, cake is an excellent reason to get married." After they put Emma to bed, Daniel and Alexander stood in the hallway, leaning against each other in the darkness. "Was she serious?" Daniel asked. "About marriage?" "I hope so." Alexander turned to face him, his hands settling on Daniel's waist. "Because I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, trying to find the perfect moment." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Daniel's breath stopped. Alexander dropped to one knee right there in the narrow hallway, looking up at Daniel with eyes that shone with love and vulnerability. "Daniel Marcus Morgan, I know it's only been a few months. I know this is fast and probably crazy. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You and Emma have given me more happiness than I ever thought possible. You've shown me what it means to be brave and authentic and loved. I want to spend the rest of my life making you both happy. It's building a family with you. being someone you can count on through everything. Will you marry me? Daniel's hands covered his mouth, tears streaming down his face. Alexander, I know it's not practical. I know there are 1,000 reasons to wait. But I don't want to wait. I want to be your husband. I want to adopt Emma if she and you will have me. I want to build a life together that's full of dinosaur parties and bedtime stories and quiet moments like this. So what do you say? Will you marry me? Yes, Daniel gasped, pulling Alexander to his feet and kissing him desperately. Yes, yes, yes. I love you so much. Alexander slipped the ring a simple platinum band that fit perfectly onto Daniel's finger, then kissed him again, both of them laughing and crying at once. They stumbled back against the wall, holding each other close, overwhelmed with joy and relief and love. I can't believe this is real, Daniel whispered against Alexander's neck. 6 months ago, I was sitting alone at a wedding, thinking I'd never find someone. And now you're stuck with me forever, Alexander finished with a grin. You and Emma both. If that's okay, more than okay. Daniel kissed him again. It's perfect. They heard a small gasp and turned to find Emma peeking out of her room, eyes wide. Did Papa Alexander ask you to marry him? He did. Daniel held out his hand, showing her the ring. Is that okay with you? Emma squealed and launched herself at them both, and they caught her together. The three of them collapsing in a laughing, crying heap on the floor. This is the best day ever. Even better than my birthday? Even better than dinosaur cake? Alexander teased.
Oh, ow.
Almost as good as dinosaur cake? Emma kissed both their cheeks. Are we going to have a big party? The biggest, Alexander promised. With cake and dancing and all your friends. Whatever you want, princess. Can I be the flower girl again? Absolutely. They stayed there on the floor for a long time, tangled together, now talking about wedding plans and the future and all the possibilities that lay ahead. Daniel looked at his daughter and his fiancés, and felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it almost hurt. This wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't the safe, predictable path he'd thought he wanted. But it was better than anything he could have imagined, full of love and laughter, and the kind of joy that came from choosing each other every single day. I love you, he said to both of them. My family. I love you so much. I love you too, Daddy, Emma said, then looked at Alexander. Right, Papa, Alexander? Right, Alexander agreed, his voice rough with emotion. More than anything in the world. And in that moment, sitting on the floor of his modest apartment, with his daughter and his future husband, Daniel felt like the luckiest man alive. 6 months LATR, the wedding was small and intimate. Held in the same venue where Daniel and Alexander had first met, it felt right, coming full circle to the place where everything had changed. Emma took her role as flower girl very seriously, insisting on practicing her walk down the aisle at least 50 times. She wore a white dress with dinosaurs embroidered on the hem. Perfect compromise between formal and her current obsession. Alexander's mother attended, openly crying through the entire ceremony despite her husband's absence. Kevin stood as Alexander's best man, giving a speech that had everyone laughing and crying. Margaret walked Daniel down the aisle, her eyes shining with pride and love. But the best part, the moment that made Daniel's heart swell until he thought it might burst, was when Alexander looked at him during their vows. His voice was steady and sure as he promised to love Daniel through everything, to be a partner and father and friend. To choose them every single day for the rest of his life, Daniel's own vows were simpler. You sat down next to me when I was alone. You saw me when I felt invisible. You loved my daughter like she was your own, and you showed me what it means to be brave. I promise to love you through everything, to be your safe harbor and your biggest cheerleader, to choose us every single day. Thank you for pretending to be my husband that first night. I'm so glad we don't have to pretend anymore. When the officiant pronounced them married, Alexander kissed Daniel like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. Emma cheered louder than anyone, jumping up and down with pure joy. The reception was full of laughter and dancing and cake, dinosaur cake, at Emma's insistence. Daniel danced with his daughter, with his new husband. With Margaret, who whispered that she'd known from the start they were meant to be. Alexander's startup was thriving, and while his father still refused contact, more and more of the extended Chen family had reached out to offer support. As the night wound down and Emma fell asleep in Alexander's arms, Daniel looked around at their chosen family friends who'd stood by them, relatives who'd shown up, new connections forged through love and acceptance. This was what he'd been waiting for his whole life. Not perfection, but something real and beautiful and worth fighting for. Happy, Alexander murmured, shifting Emma to a more comfortable position against his shoulder. Deliriously, Daniel admitted, leaning into his husband's side. His husband? He'd never get tired of that word. Thank you for being brave enough to sit down at my table that night. Thank you for being brave enough to let me stay. Alexander pressed a kiss to his temple. Best decision I ever made. They stood there together, holding their daughter between them, watching their friends and family celebrate their love. It hadn't been easy, and Daniel knew there would be more challenges ahead. But they'd face them together. This family they'd chosen and built and fought for, and that made all the difference. The end. Did this story touch your heart? This journey from a lonely wedding table to a beautiful family reminds us that love can find us when we least expect it to, that being brave enough to embrace can change everything. If you felt the emotion in Daniel and Alexander's story, please like this video. Comment below. Have you ever taken a chance on love despite the risks? What was your favorite moment in Daniel and Alexander's journey? Should we continue their story? What would you like to see next? Subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt LGBTQ romance stories that celebrate love, courage, and family. Want to see what happens next? Should we create a part 2 showing Daniel and Alexander's first year as a married couple? Emma's adoption journey. Alexander reconnecting with his father, their growing family, and new adventures? Let us know in the comments if you want part 2. Your support means everything and helps us create more beautiful love stories. Thank you for watching, and remember, true love is worth fighting for, and family is what we choose to build together.